Gregory Ashford went down at the farmer's market on a Saturday morning between a stand selling heirloom tomatoes and a stand selling honey, and the last clear thought he had before the world folded in on itself was his daughter's name,
I'm
which
just
was
so glad you
strange,
called.
because he had not let himself think her name on purpose in almost 3 years. Maria Delgado was off duty, in line for peaches, when she heard the sound a body makes hitting pavement, a sound she had learned to recognize from 12 years working the emergency department at County General, a sound that was different from a stumble, different from a fall that a person catches themselves out of. She turned and was already moving before she'd fully processed what she was moving toward, dropping her canvas bag of vegetables in the dirt, kneeling beside a gray-haired man in expensive weekend clothes whose lips had already started to color wrong. "Someone call 911, she said, checking his airway, finding no pulse, starting compressions before the sentence was even finished. "Now, tell them cardiac arrest, adult male, bystander CPR in progress." She worked on him for 6 minutes in the dirt between the tomatoes and the honey, counting under her breath, switching her weight the way her body had been trained to do 1,000 times over, and somewhere in the 3rd minute, between compressions, the man's mouth moved around a word that wasn't breath yet, wasn't quite anything yet, but sounded unmistakably like a name. "Emma," he said. "Tell Emma." And then the paramedics arrived and Maria stepped back, and did not think about the name again until 3 days later, when a hospital administrator called to ask if she'd be willing to meet with the patient she'd saved, because he had been asking since he woke up to meet the woman who'd knelt over him in the dirt dot before we find out what happened in that hospital room, and the question Maria would eventually ask him that undid a very rich man in front of a very ordinary vending machine. We need a minute to understand who Maria Delgado was, and why the word Emma had lodged itself in her the way it had. Maria was 41 years old, and she had worked the emergency department at County General for 12 years, 4 of them as a charge nurse, on a base salary of $34.50 an hour that came with mandatory overtime during the winter flu surges and a staffing ratio the hospital board had been promising to fix for 3 consecutive budget cycles. She had raised 2 children largely on double shifts and had buried her own mother 18 months earlier after a cardiac event that the family had not caught in time, because nobody near her mother that day had known CPR, had known the signs, had known what 6 minutes of the right kind of pressure on a chest could actually mean for a person's remaining decades. Maria had promised herself, standing at her mother's funeral, that she would never again stand near someone dying of something she knew how to stop. Gregory Ashford was 63 years old, a real estate developer whose name sat on 4 office towers across 2 states, worth, by the most recent estimate anyone bothered to publish, somewhere north of $600 million. His wife had died 11 years earlier, quickly, of a stroke that gave the family no warning at all, and in the aftermath Gregory had done the thing some men do with grief they don't know how to hold. He had poured himself entirely into work, building larger, moving faster, filling every hour that might otherwise have had room in it for feeling something. His daughter, Emma, had needed him during those years in ways he had not shown up for. He had missed her college graduation for a groundbreaking ceremony he could have delegated to anyone. He had missed her wedding rehearsal dinner for a deal closing that, 3 years later, he could not even remember the specifics of. Emma had stopped calling 2 years ago, not out of cruelty, but out of the particular exhaustion of a daughter who had run out of ways to ask her father to choose her. They had not spoken in 11 months when his heart stopped between the tomatoes and the honey. Maria came to the hospital room reluctantly, in street clothes on her day off, mostly because the administrator had asked twice, and because some deep habit of her training made it hard to say no when a patient specifically requested to see her. "You're the one who saved my life," Gregory said from the hospital bed, looking smaller than his net worth suggested a person could look. "They told me it was 6 minutes. They told me most people don't come back from 6 minutes. Most people don't have someone start compressions in the first 90 seconds, Maria said. "You were lucky. I happened to be in line for peaches." Gregory laughed, a small, surprised sound, like he hadn't expected to laugh again so soon. Then his face went serious. "I want to do something for you. Whatever it is, I mean that seriously. Whatever you need. Before we continue, if you believe that the debts that matter most rarely get settled with money, please like this video, subscribe to Kindness Tailies, and share this with someone who needs to believe in people again." Today, Maria said what she'd said the last 4 times a grateful family had tried to press money into her hands after a save. "I appreciate that. I don't need anything. It's the job. I already spoke to your hospital," Gregory said. "I know what the job pays. I know what the ratios are like right now because I asked, and people were very willing to tell me once they understood who was asking. Let me write a check. Something that actually reflects what you did." Maria looked at him for a long moment, and something in her, 12 years of watching gratitude arrive in forms that never quite fit what had actually happened, made her ask the question instead of taking the check. "Who's Emma?" Gregory went very still. "You said her name," Maria said. "In the dirt. Between compressions. You said, 'Tell Emma.' I've thought about it for 3 days, because most people in that state don't manage a full sentence. You managed a name and half of one more thing. I didn't figure it was my business until you offered me a blank check for pushing on your chest for 6 minutes. So I'll tell you what I actually want if you meant it. Anything." "I don't want your money," Maria said. "I want you to call her. Today, if you can manage it. Whatever's between you two, I don't need the details. But you said her name before you said anything else, including before you thanked God or cursed the pavement or asked where you were. That tells me everything I need to know about what actually matters to you. And it isn't a real estate portfolio." Gregory was quiet for a long time. Long enough that Maria thought she'd overstepped. Long enough that she started rehearsing an apology in her head. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost the polish it had carried a moment before. "We haven't spoken in 11 months, he said. "My missed things. A lot of things. Her graduation, her rehearsal dinner, more birthdays than I want to count out loud. I told myself I'd make it up to her once the next deal closed, and then there was always a next deal, until there wasn't a version of me left that knew how to just show up, without an agenda attached to it." "You showed up in the dirt today," Maria said. "Just not the way you meant to. Gregory laughed again, wetter this time, closer to something else. That's a hell of a wake-up call. Cardiac arrest usually is, Maria said, and did not soften it, because she'd learned a long time ago that grateful people needed the truth more than they needed comfort. And Gregory Ashford had just been given, free of charge, the rarest thing a man like him ever received. A second chance that came with no invoice attached. He called Emma from the hospital room 40 minutes later, with Maria still in the doorway, close enough to hear the shake in his voice, but far enough to give him privacy. Maria didn't hear the words. She heard the tone shift over 11 minutes, from apology to something raw, something that sounded, by the end, like two people crying on either end of a phone line for reasons that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with time nobody could get back, but could apparently still choose to spend differently going forward. Emma flew in 2 days later. Maria was not there for that reunion. It wasn't hers to witness, but the hospital social worker mentioned, in passing, that Emma had stayed at her father's bedside for 6 straight hours the first day, and that neither of them had let go of the other's hand for most of it. 3 weeks after his discharge, Gregory Ashford came to County General unannounced, not with a check for Maria personally, which he now understood she would never accept, but with a proposal for the hospital board. Full funding for 2 additional charge nurse positions in the emergency department, a market rate adjustment for the entire nursing staff, and a $40,000 donation earmarked specifically for portable defibrillators to be placed at every farmer's market, public park, and transit hub in the county, so that the next 6 minutes for someone else's father would not depend on a nurse happening to be in line for Peaches. Maria found out about the funding from a memo, not from Gregory directly, which was, she thought, exactly right. Some gratitude does its best work when it stops needing to be witnessed by the person it was meant for. She kept a peach in her refrigerator for a week afterward, uneaten, a small private joke with herself about the strangest Saturday of her year, before she finally ate it, because a peach, after all, is meant to be eaten the same way a second chance is meant to be used, not just kept as a souvenir of the moment it arrived. If this story moved you, please like this video, leave a comment, and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe to Kindness Tales for more stories of courage, grace, and the small human moments that change everything. And tell us in the comments, if you were given one honest thing to ask a stranger for, instead of money, what would it be?